Everybody have a chance to take a look at the minutes?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on claims from July 9th, 2018.
Claims this evening are $501,200.66.
I'll move we approve, and I'd like to get the answers to the questions I had emailed you earlier
Okay.
that you're aware of. In the amount of $501,266.
Second.
Got a motion and second to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on regular operators licenses.
You're asked to recommend approval of 8 regular operator licenses to Andrew Zeller, Brandon Clark, Tracy Hagberg, Terry Barrett, Chelsea Anderson, Tara Evgen, Beth Clymer, and Rebecca Hill, contingent on payment of any outstanding debt owed to the city and successful completion of the background check for the period of July 10th, 2018 to June 30th, 2020.
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and second to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on temporary operators licenses.
Tonight, you're asked to recommend approval of 6 temporary operator licenses to Eric Sterner, Christopher Shelton, Jacob Lutz, Teresa Murlaw, Thomas Murlaw, and David Ellenwood for the Backcountry Brewfest on July 14th, 2018.
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion second to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on letter of engagement for Cooley Road retaining wall.
Good evening. I'd like to discuss and talk about maybe possible some action on a letter of engagement for the retaining wall that is failing on Cooley Road right across from Casanova's Liquor Store. At the Public Works meeting, June 25th, it was recommended that we obtain a letter of engagement for engineering services for design and construction of a retaining wall on Cooley Road. In the issue sheet, there is a letter of engagement and the scope, items that they'll be doing as part of that. Design, investigation, surveys, prepare plans and specs, estimate probable construction costs, prepare, advertise for bid, tabulate bids, and prepare contracts. Provide construction observation, material testing. Schedule would be council approval for plans and bid, plans and authorize ad for bid August 6th, ad for bid published August 9th and 16th. Bids will be opened on August 30th. Council could consider awarding a contract at September 4th meeting, and construction would be in the fall of September of 2018. Did I say September 4th, 2017? Anyway, plan phase estimated 80 hours, not to exceed 10,700. Construction phase estimated 40 hours, 7,000. Total estimated engineering cost $17,700.
Tom, this seems ridiculously high. And have we used Bolton and Mink for this type of estimated cost for a retaining wall?
I've never done a retaining wall project yet. We haven't done many in the city. In fact, that's been an ongoing conversation in Public Works, is how we're going to develop and handle retaining walls. We haven't really decided anything or come to a conclusion on assessments, responsibilities, and things like that. So
Does
no.
this seem high to you? I mean, you could build a wall for that.
The thing that makes this pretty interesting is this project is, and we all know that the wall that we have now has failed. It was constructed, I tried to look back, I would estimate it 20 years ago. The thing that makes this pretty difficult and interesting is the natural springs that come off the hillside. and how you're, how to design something that's going to withhold that natural freeze thaw, the water continuously coming over that. I mean, and I don't know, maybe that's what makes this a little more difficult, and I'm not sure. To say it's high, it's a lot of money, absolutely.
Is the engineer here to answer, to
No.
ask that question?
No, he's not.
No.
We also have to identify a source of funding.
At what point did this should have gone out to RFP itself?
Pardon me?
At what point, because we declared it an emergency, didn't have to go to RFP per our policy?
Oh, this isn't, yeah, this has already been Bolton and Mink and SEH, I think.
We interviewed them, so we
You-
have contracts.
And
with
this
both
is
of them.
within their hourly scope of,
It is, yeah, but it is high.
it is high. So we could go out for RFP for engineering?
We could,
For this specific project.
yep.
I mean, unless there's, the other outfit wants to give us a better bid. That's ridiculous to me. That seems
Yeah, I
expensive.
don't have any way of knowing whether, I mean,
Can
How
I-
many feet
Another,
of,
oh, go ahead.
how many feet of retaining wall is this?
And a part of this is engineering for the whole wall from the westerly portion down by, there's a advertising sign down there, all the way to there's a home that's across from the Casanovas. The engineering portion would be for the entire wall, or, the entire wall. After they do the design and cost estimate, then the city council would have to decide if you're gonna do just the damaged portion or the entire wall.
This is the whole wall?
This would be the design and engineering for the entire wall. But once the bids come in, then, then there's gonna be a decision to be made about, you wanna do the entire wall or just a portion of the wall that's damaged, in the photos.
Did it say how many feet did you, is that what you just asked?
That's what I just asked, yes. And he didn't
You don't have that
give me a
number?
number. I mean, is this a quarter mile?
I apologize, I think we measured 135, and I don't know if that's from the westerly portion to the damaged area. I know that, just some numbers being thrown around were $40 a square foot, and it was close to $50,000 just for the damaged portion.
oh,
Well, that's, that's 1/4, almost a half of what this is.
I think the whole bill, if you do the whole wall, it was gonna be closer to 100 and something, but,
And who owns the property? Has that been established?
the property owner is actually, it's John Gaffer or Terrell Gaffer. It's part of the Casanova family, or, part of that property.
Is the wall our responsibility?
well, if it was necessary to build the retaining wall in order to put in a sidewalk, yes. If it's considered, our special assessment policy assesses 50% city, 50% property owner for sidewalk replacement. My question was, in doing this wall, are you going to have to rebuild the sidewalk in that area or anything like that? I don't know. We'd need the engineer to say if this could be considered part of the sidewalk and then assessed, but it's still 50%. But that's questionable. I think you should proceed. I mean, we'd have to determine that, or an engineer would.
I did speak with him, in that regard today. He stated that if the sidewalk were not there, that there would be enough slope to grade the hillside from the current hillside down to the curb. But seeing that there is the sidewalk there, the retaining wall is needed because of the sidewalk, is what his opinion was today.
Do we know, Tom, if the retaining wall is within the right-of-way or if it's actually on private property?
We'd have to get a survey.
Don't know that
We'd
yet.
have to find the stakes or get it surveyed.
That would make some difference, in that if it's within the right-of-way, arguably, it's a city responsibility. Although still, if it's part of trying to fit it into the special assessment policy. If it's part of constructing the sidewalk, a portion may be able to be assessed.
Well, that's,
all I can
you
say.
have no doubt the spring helped erode that wall and the ice and freeze and,
So, exactly, and is that, when you say spring, is that where the water comes from, that they make that big ice monolith?
That didn't help anything either.
No, I mean, that's a problem. I mean, obviously, they're shooting that water up into the tree there. And I noticed this past spring, that sidewalk was probably a huge liability for us because that was covered with ice from the melting of that for some time.
Yeah, we barricaded it off for a while, and finally we just put salt just really salted it. And
we've had that conversation a few winters. Every winter I've talked to Tom about that, public safety wise.
If we're gonna pay for that, there's no doubt in my mind that the failure of that wall has to do with erosion coming from that water. And, I mean, how often are we gonna do that?
I'm not, and then that's getting back to Randy's question is, I think this engineering is gonna be, probably gonna have to really go into detail about how to control that water and get it, I'm pretty sure what I seen when that was constructed, I know there's drain tile behind that wall and it's directed into a catch basin out on Cooley Road, but when we have that freezing and once that up top surface is frozen, then the water's coming over ground and not going down into the subsoil and into that drain.
Is that an actual spring? It's not a well?
There's probably several up there.
Okay. And whose responsibility is that?
Landowners, isn't it?
You mean for controlling their drainage?
It would
I
be the
don't
land.
know. I mean, offhand,
I mean, I could see us having this conversation, or maybe not us, but the city having this conversation every, 5-10 years?
well, it's been there for
I think it's
20?
been there 20. I don't know exactly. I couldn't
He
find
just
any
started
records
doing
to-
that, though, not that long ago.
It's been a few years he's been doing it.
I'd say 6.
Yeah. So you're kind of under the opinion that we need a good structural engineering plan for a wall. But see, I don't want to pay for it.
Well, we can, I know that it was designed last time with retaining wall block and drain tile on the backside. That hasn't worked. So now we have to go to Plan B, something maybe a little stronger than that. Or we're gonna be looking at, someone else is gonna be standing here explaining.
You're just like, I'm down.
So, yeah, well, I don't know what your pleasure is, but
Can just the damaged portion be fixed? I mean, is that
Absolutely.
possible, or would that
Yep,
compromise?
I think, the design is gonna be looking at the whole thing, but I think when we see about what the construction cost is gonna be, I think we could just do from the westerly portion to the damaged area. And I think there's kind of a telephone pole that kind of stops right there. There's a little indent.
Yeah, we got the picture there.
But maybe it would cost less to design if you're just doing,
Tom, what is the urgency and the liability involved here?
Well, right now we have barricades covering half the sidewalk, so anyone with a handicap or wheelchair or some kind of motorized wheelchair would not be able to get, he's gonna drive on the grass a little bit and it's a little uneven there, I suppose, but it's not a full sidewalk right at the moment.
I would prefer not to do anything unless it involves a long-term solution in dealing with that spring.
I'd agree, but I'd like to see the scope narrowed down to just the damage part. And I want to see if they can sharpen their pencil at Bolton Mink and SEH, all the in-house. I
You
guess
can
that's
get a cost in from SEH and talk to Bolton and Mink and see if they can, just do the damaged portion and confine the scope a little bit and see if they can do better.
yeah.
The other possibility, would you be able to do a temporary concrete, where you're saying the portion is where a wheelchair or whatever? I don't know the answer to this, Tom, but
Well, one thing we could do is go in there and see if we can get our backhoe or a bobcat in there, dig a portion of the dirt out. Now we have to get permission from the property owner or whatever, and then we could put a jersey barrier or something in there like you see along the highways. We could rent, we don't have any, we maybe have a few. and put them up as a temporary.
I just was thinking of the wheelchair access and that type of thing. I mean, I would think that we'd be able to tell them we're going to do this, because it's a,
Maybe just get
if it's in our right of way.
we'll have to
Yeah,
determine.
Yeah, but where are
determine
you
that.
talking
Where
about having
he's
the
saying the
wheelchair?
wheelchairs can't get around because of the barriers. Is there something we can do to widen the sidewalk in
Into
that
the
area?
street? Or no, in the
onto the
hill?
boulevard.
Take
or
some of that
somewhere.
hillside some of the hillside is actually on the sidewalk, if you look at the picture. It's, so we could clean it up a little bit and then put a temporary jersey barrier or something.
Well, just a thought.
With that.
That's a good idea.
So Jersey barrier, you mean one of those concrete barriers that
You
they?
see on the interstate,
See on the interstate?
something like
Yeah,
that?
okay.
Probably takes, they're 6, 8 feet long, 10
Yeah.
feet long, so.
Well, do you need a
So that
form?
would be a temporary thing while you explore doing something more
Sure.
permanent.
Do you want a motion for something like that?
You want a recommendation?
Well, yeah, I would like to move that we narrow the scope of the project to the damaged part of the wall. Ask SEH and Bolton Mink to sharpen their pencils. Determine the right-of-way, and if you can, without running a fulls.
I can see if the property owner knows if there's some stakes there, or we can, see about getting a certified map or get it surveyed.
At least locate the pipe, the iron.
Yeah, the property.
And then for temporary fix, maybe 2, 3 Jersey barriers.
I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Discussion and possible action on proposal for city engineer position.
Mike isn't here, but we've been discussing since Tom Sifko left alternatives, and because of what we were paying Tom on an hourly basis, we came up with an idea potentially, well, do we want to hire a full-time city engineer? As you can see, the impact's about $13,000 on the budget, because what they'd be getting paid versus what we were paying Tom on a part-time basis, there's just significantly less.
And they probably could have done. what we
Well,
were just
I was going to
talking
bring
about.
that up, whether, wanted to delay it until, Brenda and Mike and I came up with this proposal. I think there's, for plan review, and there's a number of things, and I know there's been discussions with Public Works and Parks Director, the responsibilities, some of the things that, for the Public Works Director, he wouldn't, if we had an engineer on staff, there'd be less, that person could do some of that, review process. And I know that Kip said he'd be willing to, for the utilities even, just for plan review and that type of thing. So we just came up with this proposal. The money's essentially there in the budget this year, and next year would be about $13,000 that we'd have to find. So it was
So where would the rest of the engineer's salary?
well, for this year, we'd be fine because what we had budgeted for Tom Sifko.
Okay.
Because the amount, his hourly rate was a lot more than what this individual would, because
Okay.
we kind of contracted with him. So this year, there'll be no, and plus we haven't had one for how many
Right.
months? For next year, we're estimating based on what we budgeted this year, right, Brenda, there'd be about it.
So you would transfer money from this year's budget to next year's budget?
Well, this
to
year,
cover this?
what I'm saying is, if we were to hire someone in September or something, we'd have this year's budget
Right.
covered. To fully fund this position next year, there would be an increase of about $13,000 over what we budgeted this year,
Oh, okay.
of which $5,800 is for the general fund. And yes, we could, if there were savings for 1 year, we could, whatever we didn't spend this year, we could carry over into next year to help defray
Okay.
the costs.
That's what I didn't understand, was that you were
Then you'd have a staff
calculating what
person
you
to do the
budgeted
plan
this year.
reviews and to, you'd have someone here, Tom wasn't here all the time, but that's how it was set, position was set up, but
This is full-time, and
full-time.
this is comparable,
Mike did some
comparables.
contacts
Yep,
and he
we
said,
looked.
it'd be like an entry-level engineer, I mean, entry-level at a city. I
Okay.
mean,
I like the idea.
I do too.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to go ahead and, so, start the hiring process? Is that what you're asking for? Yes.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on temporary Class B license for the Phipps Center for the Arts Dance Council on August 2nd, 2018.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion second to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on taxi driver's license.
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion second to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on change order to Walnut Street Bridge project.
Come up to, you can, I'll just do an introduction and get things rolling here. As you all know, we started construction on the Walnut Street Bridge. We did run into some difficulties, but fortunately, we did get the bridge open by Memorial Weekend as planned and hoped for. But unfortunately, we ran into some difficulties. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Johnson from, he's a structural engineer from SEH. And he did an overview and summary that was in your issue sheet. And then there's some background history, some photos, and some options as far as how we're going to handle the change order.
I'm Jeff Johnson, a structural engineer with SCH for over 37 years. Did a lot of bridge rehab projects and working on your Walnut Street Bridge. Just a little update on it, and you're aware the bridge has been opened. I think it's been a pretty good success as far as the deck surface and the appearance of the bridge. Sidewalks were replaced, a portion of the deck replaced, the rest of it repaired. One thing when we estimated this project along with several other consultants over the years, there's been patches on that bridge that have been made in part that cover up some of the sins that were underneath those shallow patches. From the underside, they weren't revealed because the salt has not been applied to that bridge since the Highway 12 moved in the 1950s to the interstate route. And as we started to remove some of the deck, there were some areas that were in very poor concrete condition. The rebar is very good, again, because it didn't have the salt, it didn't get the corrosion. But we didn't want to leave that concrete in a kind of a poor state with just a nice, smooth, white surface on top, but yet unsound concrete below. So a little summary, the bids came in about $29,000 underneath the engineer's estimate. An additional grant was acquired by the city beyond the first one, and that was another $138,000 towards the project. So before the project started, we had $167,000 in extra funds towards this project than what was anticipated. We got the bridge open by Memorial Day weekend as was scheduled, but we did have to incur some additional effort to replace the damaged or poor condition concrete that was discovered once we milled the surface off. And that incurred about $101,000 of an additional cost for that one item. We have a couple of options. We've got two more things to complete on the bridge. One is blast cleaning and painting the metal railing. It's about a $58,000 item. And then the repair of the concrete pier near the water line. There's two piers there, each with two columns that are in fairly poor condition, and they are a structural element of that bridge. So there's $112,000 yet to be expended on the project. But we wanted to bring it to your attention because the total project at this point from the amount bid would overrun by $101,000, but still it would bring it in better than $50,000 underneath the funded amount for the project. So I think the preference is, as long as the funds are available, is to continue to complete the project so that we stabilize the pier and ideally paint the railing. The bridge will look nearly new from the top side, and it'll be structurally sound for many years. The other options, if you do not wish to proceed with it in light of the overrun on the quantity of 101 for the deck repair, is that we could eliminate the repair of the piers and the painting and stop the project at this point at the stage that it's at. I do not recommend that because the structural condition is still somewhat in question with the piers, and from being familiar with some of these costs, that price for doing the pier repair is a pretty reasonable price, and to bid that out at a later time, it's going to be considerably more expensive as a single standalone project. Our recommendation is to continue with the project since the funds have been committed to the project. Even though with the rehab, things do change, and in this case, the condition of the deck wasn't as good as anybody had anticipated. But we've got that corrected at this point. If you want to reduce some of the additional cost in the project, it would be possible to not paint the railing. It's not in a state of corrosion that's compromising the integrity of the railing. It's more of an aesthetic element on the bridge at this point. The thought originally was to paint the railing, as long as the deck and sidewalk are all new, to paint that railing as well and get a much longer service life out of it.
So to finish the project completely, you're looking for 101,755,
112,000.
and we do have that?
We do, we have that in the existing budget.
If we're gonna do it, then we should do it right and we should finish it.
That's my take on it. But we just wanted to bring it to your attention at this stage because that first phase with the deck repair did overrun. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page with it, wanting to proceed with the project.
There's still about $30,000 left in the project budget, so
Even after
not
that.
that if something else were to
Yep.
pop up yet.
Right.
I'll move to approve.
And I'll second.
A motion second to approve.
Option one.
Yeah, finish the underside and, or what is the piers?
The piers and the
then
painting of the railing.
painting of
yes.
the rails, yes.
So under option one, you said, there it is, okay.
And essentially, kind of to summarize that too, would be to recommend to the council approval of change order 1.
Okay, I'll add that to the motion.
So the total cost of the project then is gonna be like 558?
Correct.
Correct.
But with no new monies expended by the city.
Correct.
Right.
All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion's approved.
Thank you.
Discussion and possible action on floodway study for portion of St. Croix River.
Again, Mike isn't here. They're proposing doing a floodway study from, oh, well, we have the engineer here, so that's even better than Devin trying to. So,
We're giving SEH a lot of money tonight.
You were trying to take some away from
I was trying to take some away.
I've come here to a number of your meetings and talked about floodway and floodplain issues. With the River City Center, we kind of got into a novel situation where the River City Center, the backside of the River City Center is in the floodplain. The floodplain regulatorily is split up into two segments, the floodway and the flood fringe. The floodway is the area that's flowing during a flooding event. The flood fringe is the area that's standing mostly still. So if you imagine the marina is generally pretty still during even high water events, but you go out into the channel on the other side of the islands and it's moving pretty quickly. Unfortunately, when FEMA and DNR did their last floodplain mapping exercise back in 2009, they decided not to make the determination on where the flood fringe, floodway boundary is. To add to that decision, they decided that any part of the floodplain was considered floodway. Your code, your floodplain code, and DNR's floodplain code says that floodway is very difficult to construct within because in their mind, in the floodway, you're actually backing up water, you're potentially increasing flood elevations upstream. So in order to make sure that we're not doing that, we need to determine where that floodway is. So this has come up because of the River City Center, but you also have a TIF district that you're approving, I believe, this evening that goes all the way up to Elm Street, I believe is the northern edge. So it was felt in discussion with Mr. Johnson that let's clean this up, let's not have this issue up and down the river as other developments occur along the riverfront there. So the proposal that we have before you this evening is to do a floodway determination from I-94 to St. Croix Street. That covers all of TID number 6. We would do the hydraulic modeling. We would have a couple of meetings with DNR, FEMA. We would also include Minnesota DNR because they have a different way of making a determination of floodway, and we want those two entities to work together. We actually kind of like the way that Minnesota DNR interprets it. It's a lot more friendly to development along the riverway. So we would go through those things. We'd have this completed by early September, and it would resolve a lot of issues that potentially we could have up and down that riverfront as redevelopment occurs there.
So, trying to think, is St. Croix Street, why wouldn't you go all the way up to the boundary, northern boundary?
North of St. Croix Street, you get into the situation where Lake Malibu has two outlets. Has the outlet to the west and has the outlet to the south. Lake Malibu has some other things going on. Obviously, there's the dam there that really complicates matters, and so we felt that St. Croix would be a decent spot to end without getting into the Lake Malibu issues.
And then, so you complete the study, and you make a recommendation,
Yep.
and who acts on that?
So right now, the city you are your own floodplain
Oh, really?
regulator.
Oh, okay.
The DNR obviously has the ability to step in and say, we don't believe that you're
Right.
enforcing your floodplain correctly, but you folks are the arbiter of floodplain regulations in the community. So the idea would be that would be approved on a local level. We would submit it to DNR, we would submit it to FEMA, and we would get their comments on it. At this point, the scope that we're proposing here doesn't include, there's a number of additional steps that they could require. We don't believe that they will, but they could require us to go all the way through what's called a letter of map revision, which is formally adopting the floodplain. That can get pretty cumbersome. We would prefer not to do that if in fact it's not a necessary step. So rather than spending your monies unwisely, let's get to the point at which we know we have to do things. We know we have to prove numerically where this floodway is, and then we can deal with the adoption part of it secondary.
So essentially what we're talking about is somewhere in between the natural shoreline at regular water level and the eastern side of First Street.
Yeah, my hope is that we're pretty close to the
In the middle.
shoreline.
Close to the
normal
shoreline?
pool,
Yeah, okay.
Yes. What DNR in Minnesota does is they consider it to be the ordinary high water mark. Everything riverward of that is floodway. Everything landward of that is
Got it.
flood fringe. We're hopeful that we can get DNR Wisconsin to adopt that interpretation.
Okay.
Are you doing this pro bono?
We have our proposal is for $23,500 estimated fee.
Is that the best you can do?
Do we get a volume discount?
It is an estimated fee. We're hopeful that we're going to be less than that.
Where would that come from?
Brenda, is there, and maybe this is not a question for you, maybe it's more for Sean, is there a way to roll that into the TIF?
It is, yes, you can ask me that, and it is, if the TID district gets approved this evening, it would be TID eligible.
Okay.
So should we hold it over for formal action for full council?
Or you could do a contingent
Contingent
on.
on,
Yeah, if you want it, or if you want to just resolve it. I mean,
You could make the recommendation contingent on the tax increment district being approved.
I suppose we'll probably need this cleaned up for the park vision, right?
Yes, I mean, there's all sorts of things. River City Center is kind of the driver of the timing of it,
Right.
but really anything in that stretch there that has its feet in the water, you're going to have the same issue.
I'll move we approve it contingent on council decision on the TIF district tonight.
I'll second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, discussion and possible action on entering closed session pursuant to 19.85. I presume that's section 19.85, sub 1, sub C, considering employment, compensation, or performance evaluation data or any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. We're going to be doing this in the mayor's office. I apologize, I didn't see that part. I should have had the office cleaned up for everybody.
So moved.
And review of clerk applications, Director of Public Works and Parks applications. So we got a motion and a second Go into closed session, roll call.
Morissette,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
O'Connor.
Aye. Motion's approved. We will move into the mayor's office, and we will be back. Second to it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Finance stands adjourned.
Is that a yes?